Beyond the Gate spoilers teased that Naomi had taken one careless, foolish bite of the special cake Hayley had baked for Bill, and that single act would ripple through the room like a thrown pebble across a still pond, small, contemptuous, and then suddenly monstrous in its widening circles. The party had been booked into the kind of evening where masks of civility are worn like silk, and beneath them the true faces of fear, hope, and calculated desire press against the skin. Hayley, who had spent days rehearsing a smile that could pass for warmth, had baked a cake she described aloud as no sugar, for Bill, while everyone nodded and agreed that she was considerate, even saintly. It was, on the surface, the smallest of concessions, one less sugar rush, one less risk of aggravating a heart condition that had once threatened to make Bill a man of hospital corridors and quiet, domestic alarms. People loved the narrative: Hayley the careful angel, Bill the fragile patriarch, and the lie fit neatly in the mouths of the partygoers. Their laughter and little toasts smoothed the edges of what was really happening, because the truth was that Hayley had other reasons for making that cake. Not kindness but a plan, and not a plan born of cold villainy but of desperation and clumsy hope. If the party was a stage, then Hayley had been practicing every line. She had imagined the crumbs that would fall from Bill's beard, the slow smile that would unfurl as one of her recipes finally earned his approval. She'd pictured the private moment when she could slip his medications from their place and deliver into his system the exact thing she had calculated would make his world stop in a way that seemed, to her, merciful. But life and parties especially are messy things, and Hayley's scheme assumed an order that was not present. She had not accounted for the unpredictable appetite of Naomi, an impulsive woman, larger than life in her ability to taste and judge and declare opinion in public. Naomi did not wait, she devoured. She had never been one for polite samplings. When she reached for the plate Hayley had left unattended on the counter and bit into the piece meant for Bill, she did not taste it and praise Hayley's care. She spat a mouthful out onto her napkin with a mixture of disgust and theatricality, declaring that it was too weird and that there was something off about it. The instant her eyes narrowed and her tongue pushed the offending morsel away, the carefully spun plans began to unravel like cheap thread. The scene that followed was a study in misdirection. Peggy conversations pivoted, heads turned toward Naomi with playful scolds that carried undercurrents of a different fear, that the cake might be bad, not for reasons of heart health but because someone had made a culinary faux pas. Hayley, who had been hovering on the periphery of the kitchen like a moth too eager to approach a candle, felt the temperature in her chest drop. Her cheeks flushed not with embarrassment but with panic. She had momented away to take a phone call, leaving the cake unattended. That absence, just a matter of minutes, had cost her the control she wanted. The one bite Naomi spat out was a calamity dressed as critique. To the others it was only taste buds and judgment. To Hayley it was a catastrophe. This was the first of many ironies in Hayley's plot. She convinced herself joining the grander swindle and the particular choice of Bill as a mark was a calculated risk. In her mind, Bill represented a single, tidy target, an older man with soft routines, financial comfort, and a family distracted by their own private torments. She had once considered Joey as an alternative mark, someone more reckless, more loose-lipped, more prone to violent ends if he felt betrayed. Hayley, in a rare moment of honesty with herself, admitted she had been relieved not to have chosen Joey. If we had cooked Joey, she murmured one sleepless night to Randy, half in jest and half in confession, we'd be 2 graves down by now. That thought, macabre and real, brushed against the back of her throat like smoke. Joey's kind of danger is blunt force, Bill's was subtler. Something that could be shaped into an accident and ignored. But subtler plots require hands steadier than Hayley's real ones. She had already shown herself to be inept at the delicate craft of invisibility, not in malice, but in human error, leaving a plate unattended during a rowdy family party, thinking that 1 hour alone would be enough for fate to play along. Bill, for his part, was the sun around which several anxieties orbited. He had been spared Naomi's bite because he wasn't present at that moment, called away by the commotion of his children and their health concerns. His absence felt to Hayley like a reprieve and a taunt simultaneously. She had failed to make the moment happen, and yet she still believed she could manufacture it again. That belief is the dangerous alchemy of rationalization. Once you've committed to a dark plan, every failure becomes merely a delay. Hayley convinced herself that with time and a quieter opportunity, she could be more careful, more cunning. But time, as she would learn, does not merely grant opportunities, it complicates motives, allows people to change, and reveals what initial desperation tried hard to conceal. Naomi, who had spat the cake with theatrical disdain, did not innocently cause the only crisis in play. Jacob, the man who loved Naomi with an anxiety-laced tenderness, felt the news as though a physical knock had been dealt to his chest. Jacob's worry was a compound thing. He feared for Naomi's immediate health after that small act, and he feared for the fragile life inside her. Pregnancy, in the world these characters inhabit, is fragile in a way that demands respect and panic in equal measure. The audience of this evening, the drinkers and talkers, the sisters and brothers-in-law, watched Naomi's face go from smugness to fear as she realized she might have poisoned more than one person. That fear would return home with her, like a stain she could not scrub out. Jacob's inner monologue is a study in practical dread. He does not jump into melodrama. Instead, his worry manifests in small, frantic things: Googling symptoms in the bathroom stalls, calling a sympathetic doctor and pretending everything is normal, scanning the internet for anything that could explain a cake tasting weird, convincing himself that a spit triggered by taste could not be poison. The rationalizations become rituals: call a friend who works in health, text Naomi to monitor her heartbeat, ask the children if anyone else had eaten the cake. The rhythm of his fear is daily and exhausted, and yet intense enough to sharpen his attention. He notices details he had not noticed before: the tilt of Hayley's head when she laughs, the way her hands tremble when she hands a plate to someone. Small observations that, taken alone, mean nothing. Strung together they create a pattern that would later be read as proof. Hayley's decision to choose Bill rather than Joey reveals more about her psychology than any monologue ever could. She did not wish to kill for the thrill of violence. She wanted to rework her life's math, to move from scarcity to the kind of comfortable security she imagined Bill's money could purchase. But she was not a natural conspirator. Not a person forged for the slow cruelty of deception. Her attempts at subtlety were clumsy and frequently punctured by moments of self-sabotage: celebrating too loudly, answering her phone at inopportune times, displaying an affable anxiety that drew sympathetic eyes instead of suspicion. She was, in short, too human to be an ideal villain. That humanity would both haunt her and provide the prism through which the audience could understand her choices not simply as evil, but as the corrosive effects of desperation on someone emotionally unprepared for what they were willing to do. The party itself is a microcosm of social performance. People tuck their true thoughts into echoed jokes, but beneath the laughter are the soft, private crises that make people do risky things. Bill's children, preoccupied by a health scare, are present like specters. Their worry draws their father's focus away from simple pleasures like cake. That distraction is the hinge upon which Hayley hopes to pivot. Yet life proves that nothing offers complete privacy at a family dinner. Voices overlap, drinks spill, and someone always needs to step away. That small gap, where the world opens just long enough for Naomi's impulsive hand to reach out, becomes the story's fulcrum. When Naomi spat the cake out, she did more than insult a recipe. She unwittingly exposed the frailty of a plan. The moment the bite left her mouth and her face shifted, a domino of reactions began. Conversations pivoted, the mood ticked downward. Hayley's eyes became the stage's spotlight. Suddenly she was visible in a way that terrified her. She had intended invisibility. She had sought to be the furtive hand in a quiet moment. Instead she had become one of many eyes in the room. The party, for all its noise and noise's consent to forget, held a mirror up to her, and she did not like the reflection. Her plan to poison Bill was an expression of both hubris and ignorance. She had underestimated the volatility of human behavior and overestimated her own ability to orchestrate coincidence. Creating a sugar-free cake that might cause or mask a reaction is not merely a culinary tweak, it is an attempt at chemistry and psychology combined, requiring knowledge she did not have and the steadfast nerves she had not cultivated. Hayley's recipe, meant to be instrumental in a death camouflaged as a health incident, became something else entirely, a symbol that she was out of her depth. The sugar-free label, the explanation about being careful with Bill's heart, these were props in a drama she had not been trained to direct. There is also a moral arithmetic at work. Everyone in that room had stories that could be turned into motives: spouses with messed up finances, children with costly needs, old lovers nursing resentments. Hayley's decision to harm Bill was not made in a vacuum. It was the result of a life that had delivered her failure after failure. The audience, if they are honest, recognizes that desperation can make choices that, however wrong, are comprehensible. Hayley's plan is simultaneously monstrous and pitiful: monstrous because it seeks to end a life, pitiful because it stems from someone who believes murder is the fastest route to safety. Hayley's earlier regret about choosing Bill instead of Joey deserves dissection. It reveals a calculus she had made. It outlines the risks she imagined. Joey would likely have reacted violently, Hayley believed, because Joey does not forgive slight betrayal. But that same volatility would have guaranteed an immediate, probably bloody, failure, not the clean, clinical accident she envisioned for Bill. The choice was essentially between a messy, quick disaster and a planned, discreet one. She chose the latter because, in her mind, it required less immediate courage and more long-term cunning. Yet cunning takes practice, and Hayley's impulsive nature sabotaged the kind of patience required to make a quiet tragedy seem like anything other than murder. She lacked a key appreciation for one universal truth: plans that rely on others' inattention often fail because others are not mere set dressing, they are variables. Naomi's pregnancy complicates the stakes. It elevates Naomi's spitting of the cake from a snack-time drama to something pregnant with life and consequence. Jacob's worry is not melodramatic, it is a visceral, practical fear for what could happen if the cake contained any toxic compound. Pregnancy introduces a fragile calculus. A substance that might harm an adult body could be catastrophic to a developing fetus. The stakes expand. When the narrative moves beyond one person's health to the possibility of two lives being endangered, the moral weight becomes more intense. Suddenly Hayley's clumsy act of attempted murder reads not only as a criminal act but as a potential cause of generational damage. There are also cascading social consequences. If Naomi were to fall ill, if the pregnancy were jeopardized, the community's response would be swift and brutal. People would ask questions: whose cake did she eat? Who had access? Who had motive? The social gaze is a kind of justice. It sorts people into heroes and villains based on perception and rumor. Hayley's social position, a woman known for both kindness and a few odd decisions, could be re-evaluated overnight from quirky to criminal. Human suspicion is a dangerous thing. Unsealed lips can become evidence in the court of neighbors. Every glance in a small town becomes suspicious after an unexplained illness. The fear of that scrutiny can become as terrifying as the act itself. Hayley, who had only ever wanted to escape the smallness of her life, now faced the prospect of being the center of a moral inquisition. And yet, Hayley's plan had a logic to it, twisted as that logic was. She thought of Bill as a single variable that, once removed, could improve the odds for herself and Randy. Her calculus ignored the dynamic, communal reality of households, where children's illnesses pull parents' priorities away, where friends and enemies at once fill rooms with too much energy. She had not anticipated Naomi's personality, nor the social instinct that would make Naomi taste, judge, and publicly denounce. That public denouncement, so human and petty in form, would become the mechanism for Hayley's exposure. The smallness of the catalytic event is striking, not a poisoned arrow but a disgruntled palate. In that, the narrative contains a darkly comic lesson about how grand schemes can be undone by the trivial. There are emotional consequences inside Hayley, too. When the intended victim does not ingest the poison and an unintended person does, she is forced to confront the image of herself as someone who can end lives. That confrontation forces a cognitive dissonance. Hayley must reconcile the loving, protective persona she cultivated for family members with the image of herself as a would-be killer. That rift in identity is pivotal. Sudden acts of violence demand a narrative to justify them internally. Hayley fabricates rationales, It was necessary, it was mercy, it was the only way, while tiny scraps of conscience pull at her sleeve. These competing narratives churn inside her like a storm at sea, threatening to capsize her. Moreover, the failed plan illuminates the characters around Hayley in sharp relief. Randy, for instance, is not just an accomplice, he is a mirror that reflects her anxieties and validates her hopes. His silence or counsel in moments of crisis is as important as her actions. If he hesitates, the plan stumbles; if he pushes, it accelerates. The dynamic between them, who persuades whom, who bears which responsibility, reveals the moral temperature of the partnership. Are they two equally culpable conspirators, or is one leader and the other the follower? Their relationship's power structure will ultimately determine how the plot unspools. Jacob's vigilance, on the other hand, positions him as an unwitting detective. He will look for patterns. What did Naomi eat? When did she eat it? Who had access to what? He is the person whose practical worries align him with truth-seeking. His fear becomes a compass for action. He might insist Naomi see a doctor or demand tests. He might confront Hayley. Or, alternately, he might descend into paranoia, seeing Hayley in every reflective surface. The world watchers among the party are small detectives, and such minor investigations can become pivotal later, when hindsight makes patterns visible that were not then. By the time the evening's chatter cools and guests file out into the night, there remains a tension thick enough to breathe. Bill is absent, Naomi has spat the cake, Hayley's plan is thwarted for the moment, and Jacob carries a fear inside him that will not simply leave. The aftermath is not a painted tableau, it is an active, living thing. The consequences, legal, emotional, physical, have not yet manifested, but they have been set in motion. Parties end and lives continue, but the secret of what was almost done clings to clothes and conversations. Hayley will have to improvise. She will have to reconcile a failure that was as human as it was monstrous. Naomi, perhaps unaware of the depth of Hayley's intent, will have tasted and spat and left her palate the unwitting fulcrum of the coming drama. Jacob will not be able to unhear the thought that someone had intended harm. The scene closes not with answers, but with a series of frayed possibilities. Hayley's failed plot is not simply a plot point, it is a revelation of character, motive, and the oscillating line between desperation and disaster. In such a world, one loose bite can become the pivot on which multiple lives tilt. The rest of the story, for now, folds around that single action: a cake eaten, spat, and judged, an empty chair where a man might have been, and a pregnant pause in which the future sits like a held breath, waiting to see whether it will be drawn inward again with relief or expelled as a gasp of horror. The narrative tension is thick. Will Hayley attempt again and be more cunning, or will the moral gravity of her near miss tip her into remorse? Will Jacob's anxieties reveal a hidden hand, or will the threads of suspicion fray and evaporate like steam? The night's small, resonant moment leaves the characters with choices to make, some petty and some irrevocable, and it is in those choices that the story's true conflict will be found. The next steps will require cunning or confession, courage or cowardice, and no simple act will make the right choice obvious.